Hello Proponomics people, and welcome to the shortened version of the Sunday supplement from the 31st of December 2023. This is slightly longer form than the 60-second version, and this is powered by Google's Bard in AI in a little experiment that I'm running along the side. So what did Bard have to say about this week's Sunday supplement? Well, it talks about the nationwide house price index being revealed for December with a 0% roundup to print the year. And then the consensus was that it would be down 1.4% for the year, but nationwide actually printed minus 1.8%. The ONS, they're telling us, will be about minus 2.5% for the year, but of course we don't know that till about February 2024. They also discussed the 5-year gilts, opening the week at 3.3 and closing at 3.31, so basically hardly anything happened. But shouldn't be much of a surprise with no real macro news as note between Christmas and New Year. The trading range, which is the highest and the lowest, was down to 3.25 on the yields and up to 3.4 on the yields, which would normally suggest there's a bit of pressure to the upside on the yields, and yields might come back up a bit, but I wouldn't read a lot into that sort of week because there's very little trading volume. And the 5-year SONIA swap, on which the 5-year fixed rate mortgages are based, if you don't understand all that, go back and check out videos 1 and 2 in the Proponomics Advent Calendar series where I explain all that for you. That closed at 3.35%. So the majority of this week's supplement actually focused on the Q4 report from the Bank of England around the buy-to-let sector and financial stability. I thought there was a strong case to be very interested in that because these are normally a bit of a hat tip to any potential regulatory changes, such as the 125 and 145% ICR rules that were brought into play in 2017, standing for the interest coverage ratio. Again, check out the Advent Calendar if you don't understand the interest coverage ratio. I hope everyone would have joined me in agreeing these are well worth being in front of, not behind. So there was a September paper that was presented to the bank that asked the question, has the private rental sector been shrinking? And one of the things that the bank concentrate on here is the fact that they've actually come up with their own innovative measure for measuring the size of the sector, because one of the things they know is that it's actually frustratingly difficult to measure the size of the private rental sector in the UK, which is something I strongly agree with. They also recognise the reduction in profitability for landlords, and that's healthy to hear because obviously that has been happening with inflationary pressures and most of all interest rate rises. They also talk about this new measure that they've come up with, which shows smaller outflows from the sector than any other measures that have been considered before. Now, Hamptons have some good survey data, probably the best of the lot because it measures inflows and outflows. I'm just a little bit concerned they might be a bit too concentrated down in the southeast, although they do use the countrywide group's data as well because they're part of the same group. But the bank shows much larger outflows as a percentage in London and the southeast, and you would expect that because, of course, that's hurt more from the gross yields down in that neck of the woods being lower. And so as interest rates have risen, it's pushed more landlords out. So the existing data isn't great. This new measure has got a number of issues with it. But nonetheless, it might well be the best measure so far. I think it's probably fair to say, but it's not a high bar that's been set by the data in the first place, unfortunately. So one of the bank's primary conclusions that they draw is that the sector has only been shrinking since about the middle of 2019. I'm not sure if that's right or not, but the hostility of the buy-to-let changes back in 2015, George Osborne and Section 24 of the Finance Act, and then the 2017 regulatory changes, it is possible that it took a bit of time for that to kick in, although other analysis shows that the sector kind of peaked in size in about 2016-17. I spent a little bit of time thinking about why do the bank actually care about this? Well, they're really looking at the impact on financial stability. They're not looking to make any political points about renting or anything like that. They're not really overly worried about that. Of course, that's outside the scope. The bank's not supposed to be a political organisation. Of course, this is prepared by economists, this report, and therefore there can be a significant amount of time lag in some of the data that they're using. The bank view that the risk posed by buy-to-let in general is that to financial stability in the UK is moderate. So it's not nothing by any stretch of the imagination, and I expect them to be continuing to keep an eye on this. They acknowledge the sector's highly leveraged, but they also point out landlords have got a number of risk management tools at their disposal, such as hedging their interest rate exposure by fixing for longer periods of time. The bank also notes that the housing market in the UK is particularly resilient and there is a deep and liquid market for buy-to-let mortgages. So, despite these mitigating factors, the bank acknowledges some more risks as well. So, increased loan-to-value ratios, declining rental yields, which has been happening as prices have gone up and rents just haven't kept pace with prices over recent years. That wouldn't be the case for 2023, but leading up to 2023, of course. And then increased competition from institutional investors. So we looked at the 125 and 145% income multiplier rules for rental stress testing. The bank sees this as break even. I have a bit of a big problem with this, to be honest with you, because I don't see those as break even amounts at all. I see those as amounts where people would be losing money ultimately, especially as it's supposed to take into account taxes apart from anything else, because 20% of the rental revenue is frankly nowhere near enough to run a portfolio from, particularly if you're using letting agents and things like that. But the bank has some really poor figures, I think, in its report when it looks at the average price of a buy-to-let, says it's about 260k, average gross yield of 6%, which would see rent at about 1,300 a month. I think that could be true in this day and age, but I don't think that's been true for a number of years. I think that rental estimate has been far too high, but I think we're there now as rents have really caught up over the past 18 months to 2 years. And it suggests that the running costs are laughably low, to be honest. It suggests about 15% as running costs to a portfolio. Now, if you think the average agent is charging 10% plus VAT, and Arla member agents are normally charging something like 12% plus VAT, that leaves absolutely nothing left for insurance, maintenance and the likes. And I think it just shows how little of a clue they've got about the real operations, especially outside of London, of the buy-to-let sector, and how much rental profit is wiped out when you change a boiler, let alone when you consider doing something like changing a roof, where you may well not make any money from that property for 5 years. That's a very realistic proposition. So anyway, the bank's conclusions, they maintain their commitment to ensuring stability in the sector. Of course, that's their job, ensuring no risk to the financial system. And they maintain that they're going to keep their tools and their policies under review whilst they allow it to play a continued role in providing affordable housing for tenants, although that's not really what they say. I think Bard has added a bit of AI artistic license to that, let's just say, because the bank really, the undertone in the message is they don't really care about that because it isn't their job. So as I say, it's not a political statement. It's pretty much renters aren't that important, landlords aren't that important, just to the financial stability of the whole of the UK. Obviously, us as landlords or renters or both might well be feeling quite differently about that, but that's where the bank's at on it. I hope you enjoyed that summary. Thank you.